I just drained every last cent I had to buy a place, and before the new paint smell had even faded, I ran into a burglar. Turns out, the burglar was the Ice Queen CEO of my company. Her attempt at picking the lock was so clumsy, it was almost funny. When I caught her, she blushed and tried to bluster her way out of it. I bought the wrong door. No, wait, this is my fiancé's apartment. Looking at the picture of that snake of a fiancé on her phone, a wild idea started to form in my mind. 5 years later, our daughter jumps down from her lap. Daddy, Mommy hid your bonus again. Midnight. The lights of the downtown office tower finally blinked out behind me. The last train on the L was like a tired metal whale, spitting out the final batch of chewed-up office workers. I was one of them. My body was running on fumes, just a shaky soul clinging to a skeleton, shuffling in the direction of my new home. This home, this box in the sky, was something Liam Miller, had practically sold my soul for. It took my parents' retirement fund, plus every dime I'd saved over 5 years of grinding, just to own this 300-square-foot shell in the concrete jungle of Chicago. I stuck the key in the lock. Turned it. Nothing. I frowned, thinking maybe I was just so exhausted I was hallucinating. I pulled it out, shoved it back in. Still wouldn't turn. A surge of irrational anger shot up from the soles of my feet, making my scalp tingle. Don't tell me the lock on my brand new place is already broken. I pressed my ear against the cold metal of the door. From inside, I heard a faint metallic scratching, a soft click-clack. The sound was quiet, clumsy, and intermittent. The blood in my veins turned to ice. A burglar. The word was like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head, washing away every trace of exhaustion. Rage and fear seized my heart at the same time. My entire net worth was inside that door. I took a silent half-step back, my body tensing like a drawn bow. I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned the screen to its dimmest setting, and dialed 9-1-1. Just as my thumb was about to press the call button, the clicking stopped. A frustrated, muffled curse came from inside the apartment. It was a woman's voice. I froze. Then, the doorknob turned from the inside, and the door opened a crack. A head poked out, looking left and right. The motion-activated light in the hallway flickered on. The orange glow cascaded down, illuminating a face I knew all too well. Exquisite, cold, with an untouchable air that seemed to belong on a magazine cover, not in my dingy hallway. It was the high and mighty, my way or the highway CEO of my company, Claire Sterling. Right now, she was clutching a bent bobby pin. Strands of her perfect hair were stuck to her cheek, and her expression was a mask of pure, undisguised frustration. My brain blue-screened for 3 solid seconds. She saw me at the same time. Her whole body went rigid, her pupils dilating in shock. The air turned to concrete. I stared at her. She stared at me. An entire century seemed to pass. For the first time ever, I saw a crack in that permanent poker face of hers. A faint blush crept up her neck and spread to the tips of her ears. Liam Miller. Her voice had a slight tremor, betraying the fact that she, too, recognized me, a low-level drone from her corporate empire. I nodded mechanically, my eyes drawn to the bobby pin in her hand. Her face turned a deeper shade of red, like it was on fire. She fumbled to hide the bobby pin behind her back, the movement as subtle as a spooked ostrich. I have a wrong door. She tried to explain, her voice hoarse. The excuse was so bad a toddler wouldn't have bought it. Who tries to pick the lock on the wrong door? She seemed to realize this herself. Her voice changed, and she forcibly straightened her back, trying to summon her usual CEO authority. No, wait. This is my fiancé's apartment. She held up her phone, lighting up the screen as if to present evidence. On the screen was a photo of a man. He was wearing a sharp suit, smiling the smug smile of a man who had the world on a string. Handsome, polished. I looked at that face, and the entire world went silent. The only sound was the roar of my own blood in my ears. Ethan Vance, the silver-tongued real estate broker who'd charmed my parents out of their savings and vanished with my down payment. The con artist who swore to me this was a cash-only deal from a motivated seller, and that I could move in the second the papers were signed. So, he wasn't just a con artist. He was my boss's fiancé. And the apartment I'd bankrupted myself to buy was the same one he'd promised my boss as their future home. He'd sold the same property twice. How laughable. How utterly, brutally ironic. A chill seeped into my bones, crawling up my spine to the base of my skull. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just calm. A terrifyingly clear, cold calm. Seeing me staring silently at her phone, Claire's embarrassment morphed into righteous indignation. See? This is Ethan Vance, my fiancé. He bought this place for me. He said I could move in today. So, Liam, what are you doing here? And why do you have a key? Her tone was sharp, accusatory, as if I were the one trespassing. I looked at her, this titan of industry who was at this moment nothing more than a poor sucker who'd been played. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I reached into my briefcase and slowly, deliberately, took out a crisp manila folder. Under her watchful gaze, I opened it. The deed. In the section for the owner, my name was printed in clear, undeniable black ink. Liam Miller. I held it out for her to see. Ms. Sterling now, would you care to explain why you're trying to pick the lock on my front door in the middle of the night? My voice was perfectly level, devoid of any emotion. Claire's gaze lifted from the deed to my face. In an instant, the color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind only sheer, unadulterated shock. This woman, who had never lost a battle in the boardroom, opened and closed her mouth, but no words came out. Looking at her pale, bewildered face and at the smugly smiling man on her phone screen, a plan began to form in my mind. A bold, maybe even insane plan. The overhead light in the living room was stark and unforgiving. Claire Sterling, my boss, and I, her subordinate, were sitting across from each other in a bizarre standoff. She sat perched on the edge of the sofa, clutching her ridiculously expensive Hermes bag like a life raft, her body as stiff as a board. I sat on a dining chair opposite her, holding a mug of steaming water, the vapor blurring my expression. The silence in the tiny studio apartment was thick enough to choke on. I spoke first, breaking the deadlock. So, Ethan Vance told you he bought this apartment for you. All cash as a wedding gift. My tone was flat, as if I were discussing a third-party report. Claire's lips moved. Her voice was raspy. Yes. When did he tell you this? A month ago. A month ago. The exact time I signed the purchase agreement and wired the last of the money to Ethan. The man was a master of time management. I laughed coldly on the inside, but my face remained a mask. I told her my side of the story, bit by bit. How I'd found the apartment through Ethan. How he'd pressured me into a quick, all-cash offer by claiming the seller was desperate. And how I just finalized the paperwork and gotten the deed today. With every word I spoke, Claire's face grew a shade paler. By the time I finished, her normally composed features were coated in a layer of frost. She didn't say anything. She just took out her phone and dialed Ethan's number. He picked up almost immediately, his sickeningly sweet voice oozing through the speaker. Claire? Baby, why are you calling so late? Miss me already? Honey, I just closed a huge deal. I was just about to head over and surprise you. Claire had put him on speakerphone. That oily voice sounded obscenely loud in the quiet room. Ethan, where are you? Claire's voice was cold enough to freeze water. Ethan seemed to sense something was wrong. He paused. At the office, baby. What's up? Did someone upset my girl? The lies rolled off his tongue without a hint of shame. Which office? Claire pressed. Our office, of course. Where else would I? Hey, Claire, something just came up. I gotta run. I'll call you back later. Love you. Before Claire could say another word, he hung up. The dial tone echoed in the silence, a mocking tribute to her naivete. Claire gripped her phone, her knuckles white. The famous self-control she was known for shattered into a million pieces. I could see her shoulders trembling slightly. Rage, humiliation, and the agony of betrayal waged war in her eyes. She was a CEO, a person countless others looked up to. But in this moment, she was just an ordinary woman who'd been made a fool of by a grifter. After a long time, she looked up at me. He scammed me, and he scammed you. Her voice was thin, broken. I nodded. Yes, we were both played by the same con man. And now, the apartment is legally mine. And you, Ms. Sterling, have been played for a fool by your fiancé. My words were cruel, a knife twisting in an open wound. She didn't argue. She just laughed, a bitter, self-deprecating sound. Yes, I'm a joke. She stood up, as if to leave. I'm sorry to have bothered you. She walked to the door and put her hand on the knob, but then she stopped. Where could she go? Back to her family's estate. Let everyone know she'd been duped by a social climber, making herself the laughingstock of Chicago's elite. To a hotel? A single woman checking into a hotel alone in the middle of the night wasn't much safer than staying here. She hesitated, and that hesitation was my opening. I stood and walked up behind her. Ms. Sterling, do you want to get your money and your dignity back? My voice was quiet, but it carried an undeniable weight. She turned, looking at me with confusion. Do you want to make Ethan Vance pay for what he's done? I asked again. A spark ignited in her eyes. Yes. She practically spat the word. Good. I pulled out the dining chair next to her, gesturing for her to sit. Then let's talk about a partnership. She sat back down, her eyes locked on me, reevaluating this insignificant employee she barely knew existed. What kind of partnership? Simple. I took a pen and a piece of paper from my briefcase and pushed them in front of her. Ethan Vance stole my life savings, and he stole your future marriage. Our objectives are aligned. What does he want most? To marry you, to become a part of the Sterling family and leapfrog into the 1%. So, we're going to destroy the one thing he wants most. I looked her directly in the eye and said, word by word, we're getting married. Claire's eyes widened, as if I'd just suggested we fly to the moon. Are you insane? No, I'm clearer than I've ever been. I tapped my fingers on the table, a steady rhythm against the chaos in her mind. A contract marriage, of course. It's an act, a show for Ethan, and for everyone else waiting to see you fail. You, Claire Sterling, weren't dumped. You were the one who broke it off with Ethan Vance and immediately found someone better. And I need a legal reason to live in my own apartment and a powerful ally to help me get my money back. Living together, we can coordinate our plans against Ethan. Publicly, we're newlyweds. He'll have no reason to bother you, and certainly no ground to try and kick me out of this apartment. It's a win-win, Ms. Sterling. Claire's breathing grew shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She was floored by my proposal, but I could see the gears turning in that brilliant business mind of hers, weighing the pros and cons. She knew it was the most effective and also the most insane solution. The agreement. She finally spoke, her voice regaining some of its usual cool command. Rights, responsibilities, duration. Put it in writing. I'd expected as much. I picked up the pen and began to write. Party A, Claire Sterling. Party B, Liam Miller. Term of agreement. To remain in effect until Ethan Vance has faced legal consequences and all financial losses for both parties have been recovered. During the term, both parties will maintain the legal status of a married couple and will cohabitate at this residence. Party A will leverage her resources to assist Party B in recovering all stolen funds. Party B will cooperate with Party A in portraying an affectionate couple to manage all external perceptions. Clause after clause, it was clear, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion, like any other business contract. When I finished, I pushed it over to her. See if there's anything you'd like to add. She picked up the paper and read it, word for word. Finally, her eyes stopped on the last empty line. She took the pen and added a single sentence. During the term of the agreement, both parties shall refrain from any physical contact beyond the scope of the partnership and shall not interfere in each other's private romantic lives. She signed her name, Claire Sterling. The signature was just like her, sharp, angular, and exuding a cool distance. I signed my name below hers, Liam Miller. Two completely different signatures, sitting side by side on a single sheet of paper. A cohabitation agreement with my CEO, drafted in the dead of night, was now officially in effect. The next morning, I was woken by a frantic ringing of the doorbell. I'd slept on the couch and my whole body ached. The one and only bedroom had, of course, been given to my new wife and boss. The doorbell was relentless, as if someone was trying to buzz their way through the door itself. I rubbed my throbbing temples, walked over, and peered through the peephole. Standing outside was Ethan Vance. He was holding a massive bouquet of red roses, a smile he probably thought was charming plastered on his face. His hair was slicked back with so much gel a fly would break its legs trying to land on it. He was here to continue his charade with Claire. I glanced back at the closed bedroom door and felt a cold smile touch my lips. Showtime. I didn't open the door right away. Instead, I went to the bathroom. I washed my face, then took off my wrinkled work shirt and slipped into a pair of loose pajama pants and a worn t-shirt. I even ran my hands through my hair to make it messy. Only then did I stroll over and open the door. Ethan's smile froze the second he saw me. His eyes darted from my face, down to my pajamas, then past me to the apartment behind me. His carefully constructed expression twisted into a mask of rage. "Who the hell are you?" he spat, his voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" I leaned against the doorframe, looking at him lazily. "Why shouldn't I be here?" I countered. "It's my apartment." "Your apartment?" Ethan laughed like it was the funniest joke he'd ever heard. He pointed at me, then at the apartment number. "You can't even lie straight. I bought this place for Claire. This is our home. Who do you think you are breaking in here?" His voice was loud, dripping with superiority and contempt, as if I were a cockroach that had scuttled into his sacred space. "Oh, your place." I pulled the folder with the deed out of my briefcase on the floor and waved it in his face. "Read it and weep. See whose name is on the title." Ethan's eyes were glued to the document, his expression shifting from anger to shock, and then from shock to pure fury. "Impossible. That's absolutely impossible." He lunged for it, but I easily sidestepped him. "Mr. Vance, breaking and entering is a crime. I could call the cops," I said calmly. Just then, the bedroom door opened. Claire emerged, also wearing silk pajamas. Her hair was damp, as if she'd just showered. She saw Ethan at the door, her face showing no surprise, only cold, hard disgust. Seeing Claire was like seeing a lifeline. Ethan rushed towards her. "Claire, tell me what's going on. Who is this guy?" He tried to grab her hand, but she recoiled as if he were carrying the plague. "Ethan, there's nothing left for us to talk about," Claire said, her voice like ice. "Claire, listen to me. Last night was a misunderstanding. Enough." Claire cut him off. Her eyes flickered to me, then back to Ethan's face. She took a deep breath, and then did something that made Ethan's jaw drop. She walked over to me and linked her arm through mine. Her body was a little stiff, but the gesture was unmistakably intimate. "I'm officially informing you, Ethan, that our engagement is off. Because I'm with him now." Ethan's eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He stared at Claire, then at me, the muscles in his face twitching uncontrollably. "Claire, have you lost your mind? Him? He's nobody. He's a bottom-rung paper pusher at your own company. How could he ever be good enough for you?" He was practically screaming. He threw the bouquet of roses to the ground, crushing the delicate petals under his heel. I felt Claire's arm tighten on mine. I patted her hand reassuringly. Then I took a step forward, positioning myself in front of her. "Mr. Vance, I think you're confused about a few things," I said, my gaze calm but sharp. "First, this is my home. I'm asking you to leave. Now. Second, who Claire chooses to be with is her business. You no longer have any right to comment on her choices. And finally, as for whether or not I'm good enough for her," I smiled, a smile that held no warmth. "At least I would never scam her, and I certainly wouldn't steal someone's life savings." I hit those last words extra hard. The color drained from Ethan's face. He understood my meaning perfectly. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You just wait. Liam Miller, right? I'm telling you, as long as I'm around, you won't last another day at that company." He spat one last threat before turning and storming away. His retreating figure looked pathetic, like a dog with its tail between its legs. The door closed, shutting out the noise. The apartment was silent again, with just the two of us inside. Claire unlinked her arm from mine, a hint of awkwardness on her face. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me. We're allies," I replied evenly. She looked up, really looking at me for the first time. Her beautiful eyes no longer held the detached assessment of a boss looking at an employee, but something more curious, more probing. "I never noticed before," she started, pausing as if searching for the right word, "that you could be so forceful." I shrugged. "Even a cornered rabbit will bite, Ms. Sterling. Besides, he stole everything I have. It's about time I grew some teeth to protect my den." With that, I turned and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Behind me, I could feel Claire's eyes following me. I sensed that our cold, purely transactional contract had just developed a tiny, almost imperceptible crack after our first joint victory. Our life together officially began. And I quickly discovered that our CEO, the woman who was a ruthless, unstoppable force in the business world, was a complete and utter disaster at basic living. A bona fide, adult-sized baby. The first morning, I made breakfast and called her out to eat. She sat at the table, staring at the scrambled eggs and toast with a frown so deep it could kill a fly. "I don't eat this kind of food," she said, her tone dripping with natural-born pickiness. "Then what does Ms. Sterling normally eat for breakfast?" I asked patiently. "A custom-blended green juice, or a frittata prepared by my chef." I nodded, feigning understanding. Then I pushed the plate a little closer to her. "Sorry, this is a normal person's apartment. No private chefs here. Just eggs. You can either eat it or be hungry." She looked stunned. Probably for the first time in her life, someone had spoken to her that way. Her eyes were wide with a silent accusation. "How dare you?" We stared at each other for 10 seconds. Finally, she picked up her fork and silently began to eat the eggs she'd just scorned. After breakfast, she offered to do the dishes. I was surprised, but I let her have the kitchen. 5 minutes later, I heard the crash of breaking ceramic. I ran in to find her standing helplessly in the middle of a mountain of soap suds and shattered plate fragments. She had used half a bottle of dish soap. Bubbles were overflowing the sink and covering the floor. And there she was, the great Claire Sterling, scrubbing a perfectly clean water glass with a scouring pad like she was trying to buff out a dent in a car. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. My temples were pounding. "Out," I said, forcing the word through my teeth. She must have known she'd messed up, because she scurried out of the kitchen without a word. From that day on, I resigned myself to my fate. Liam Miller, was not just her contract husband, revenge ally, landlord, and employee. I was now also her full-time nanny. She couldn't cook, so I cooked. She couldn't do laundry, so I did it. She couldn't even tell the difference between salt and sugar, once almost turning a pot of chili into a dessert. I started to seriously wonder how she had survived on her own for all these years. She seemed to sense her own incompetence, and the CEO armor she wore around me began to falter. She started acting like a kid who'd done something wrong, standing quietly in the kitchen doorway while I cooked. If I was sautéing something, she'd stare at the pan. If I was chopping vegetables, she'd stare at my hands. One time, her staring was unnerving me so much that I turned around. "Ms. Sterling, is there something you need?" She shook her head, then asked in a tiny voice, "Does the oil go in before the onions, or after?" I almost threw the spatula at the wall. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, she is my ally. She is the key to getting my money back. I cannot lose my temper with her. "Ms. Sterling, why don't you go watch TV in the living room? The fumes in here might bother you," I said, gently kicking her out. She just said, "Oh," and shuffled away. But a few minutes later, she came back with a small plate of cut-up fruit and set it down next to me. "Thank you for your hard work," she said. I looked at the apple slices, all cut in different sizes, some of them crooked, and a strange feeling washed over me. Partly exasperated, partly amused. This woman was like a cat hiding inside a porcupine skin, prickly on the outside, but surprisingly soft and even clumsily sweet on the inside. The atmosphere between us, steeped in the daily routine of 3 meals a day, began to change. We were no longer just a cold boss and employee or partners in a contract. There was something else, a warmth I couldn't quite name. At night, we'd retreat to our separate spaces, her in the bedroom, me in the living room, and communicate through text messages, plotting our moves against Ethan. Using her resources, Claire quickly dug up all of Ethan's dirty laundry. He was a classic social climber from a dead-end town, using his good looks and smooth talk to latch onto one person after another until he finally hooked her, the biggest fish of all. He had no assets to his name. My money was long gone, spent on lavish toys and bad investments. And I wasn't the only one he owed. He used his status as my future son-in-law to borrow a lot of money. Claire texted me. Most of it went into high-risk crypto. He lost everything. He also has a gambling problem. I stared at the words on the screen, my eyes growing colder. The man was a bottomless pit of greed. "Ms. Sterling, I don't think we should just get our money back," I typed. "I think we should give him a gift." "What kind of gift?" "One that will give him plenty of time to reflect on his life choices, preferably from a jail cell." There was a long pause on her end. Then, a single word appeared. Agree. Ethan's retaliation came faster and dirtier than I expected. The moment I walked into the office the next day, I could feel it. My coworkers' stares were a mixture of contempt, jealousy, and morbid curiosity. In the break room, a few women were talking just loud enough for me to hear. Did you hear? It's him, Liam Miller. I don't know what kind of tricks he used to sink his claws into Ms. Sterling. I know, right? I heard Mr. Vance left because of him. What a shameless boy toy. It's disgusting. He always seemed so normal, but he's just a gold digger. The words were like poison needles hanging in the air. I held my coffee mug and walked past them, my face a blank slate. No anger, no defense. Arguing with gossips was beneath me. I knew this was Ethan's handiwork. If he couldn't have her, he would destroy her. He wanted to use the pressure of public opinion to break me, to force Claire to cut ties with me. Unfortunately for him, he'd miscalculated. I wasn't that thin-skinned, and my position wasn't that easy to shake. I went about my day, as usual. Work, meetings, reports. I ignored the whispers and the stares. They could talk all they wanted. I had work to do. Results are the best way to silence rumors. That afternoon, Claire called me into her office. It was the first time we'd had a formal interaction at work since we'd started living together. She sat behind her massive mahogany desk, her expression glacial. Have you heard the rumors? I have, I answered simply. And you have nothing to say? She looked at me, her gaze a complex mix of concern, guilt, and something else I couldn't decipher. Say what? Explain to them that I'm not a boy toy and that you weren't seduced by me. I gave a self-deprecating laugh. Ms. Sterling, do you think they believe it? People only believe what they want to believe. The more scandalous and sordid the story, the more excited they get. She was silent. This started because of me. I'll handle it, she said, reaching for her phone, probably to call the PR department. Don't. I stopped her. If you get involved now, it will only confirm our relationship in their eyes and make things worse. They'll say, see, the CEO is personally defending him. It must be true. Then what? We just let them say these things about you. Her voice was tinged with frustration. I looked at her, and a sudden warmth spread through my chest. She was worried about me. Ms. Sterling, the best way to clear my name isn't with words, but with actions. The Starlight Plaza project I'm managing is up for final review at the end of the month. Once I land that deal, all the talk about my lack of ability will vanish. As for the gossip, without the professional attacks to back it up, it's just boring office chatter. It'll die down. My voice was calm, but filled with a quiet confidence. Claire watched me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She probably never expected a low-level employee like me to handle this kind of pressure. Not with panic, but with a clear head and a fully formed counter-strategy. Are you sure you can do it? She asked. The Starlight Plaza account was the company's biggest project of the year. The competition was fierce. 100%, I said. No modesty, no hesitation. I had pulled 3 months of all-nighters for this project. The proposal had been revised over 20 times. I knew every detail by heart. That was the source of my confidence. Claire studied me for a long moment, then finally nodded. Good. You have my full support. Whatever you need from any department, you come directly to me. Don't disappoint me. I won't. I turned to leave her office. Just as I was closing the door, I thought I heard her whisper, and don't make me worry. The words were so soft, like a feather brushing against my heart. The next 2 weeks, the office was basically my home. The rumors continued, getting even worse. Ethan pulled some strings, creating roadblocks for my project at every turn. But I overcame them one by one. Claire didn't intervene publicly, but she silently provided every resource I needed. When I needed data, the market research team worked overnight to get it for me. When I needed legal advice, the firm's top lawyers were at my disposal. We were like two soldiers fighting in sync on invisible fronts, battling a common enemy. The feeling was strange but good. During the day at the office, we were boss and subordinate, professional and distant. At night, back in our little apartment, we were allies, sharing occasional moments of quiet warmth. I started getting used to coming home to a light left on in the living room. I started getting used to that helpless woman clumsily cutting up fruit for me or making me a cup of tea. And she, in turn, seemed to be getting used to my presence. She wasn't so prickly anymore. Sometimes, She would even vent to me about her frustrations at work. The wall between us was, without either of us noticing, getting thinner. At the end of the month, it was time for the project bid. As the project lead, I stood on the stage, facing dozens of discerning judges. I was calm, collected, and I laid out the proposal I knew like the back of my hand. At the end, I looked out at the audience, my gaze passing over the crowd until it landed on Claire, sitting in the front row. That concludes my presentation. The room was silent. A few seconds later, thunderous applause erupted. We'd won. I'd won. In that moment, I saw Claire's face break into a genuine, radiant smile. It was brighter than the sun shining through the window. After the celebration dinner for the project, I received a call. It was from Claire's mother, Mrs. Sterling. Her voice was regal and smooth, but her tone was an undisguised command. Mr. Miller, this is Claire's mother. Tomorrow evening, I expect you to bring Claire home for dinner. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. I held the phone, my heart sinking. I was being called into the lion's den. The time had come. Claire's parents were finally stepping in to pass judgment on the con man who had stolen their daughter. I told Claire about the call. She was on the couch, clumsily trying to follow a recipe on a new tablet I bought for her. At my words, her finger froze on the screen, and she frowned. My parents. They might not be very pleasant, she said, looking at me with concern. It's fine, I smiled. I'll handle it. But Ms. Sterling, I might need you to be an even better actress tomorrow. She paused, then understood my meaning. Don't worry. The next evening, I was behind the wheel of Claire's Maserati, a car I'd never once seen her drive, speeding towards the legendary Sterling estate. It was a mansion perched on a hill overlooking the lake in Kenilworth, as grand and imposing as a palace. The security guard at the gate saw the license plate and waved us through respectfully. As I pulled up to the main house, a butler in a tuxedo was already waiting. Miss Sterling, your parents are waiting for you in the living room. As he spoke, his eyes swept over me, a subtle look of assessment and disdain. I was wearing a suit I'd bought just for the occasion. It wasn't a designer brand, but it was well tailored and the fabric was decent. Even so, standing in this gilded palace, I felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a swan sanctuary. In the living room, Claire's parents sat on the main sofa like a king and queen on their thrones. Her father had a stern, powerful presence. Her mother was dripping in jewels, her expression critical. But the biggest surprise was the person sitting on the sofa next to them, Ethan Vance. He was dressed differently now, his face a perfect mask of hurt and sorrow. He looked for all the world like a man deeply in love, wrongfully cast aside. When he saw us, he shot to his feet. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, Claire, she's really with this man, he said, his voice choked with pain, as if we had committed some terrible crime. A classic case of the villain playing the victim. Mr. Sterling's gaze shot towards me like a dagger. You're Liam Miller. Good evening, sir, I said, giving a slight, respectful bow. Sit, he commanded, his voice cold. Claire and I sat down on the sofa opposite Ethan. A silent war had just begun. Mr. Miller, and where is it that you work? Mrs. Sterling began, slowly lifting her teacup, not even bothering to look at me. I'm a project manager under Ms. Sterling. Oh, a wage earner, she concluded, her voice light but laced with contempt. I hear, Mr. Miller, that your family is quite ordinary. Your parents are just working-class people. Ethan added helpfully from his side, his tone full of false sympathy. Yes, I nodded. Claire, is this really the man you've chosen? Mr. Sterling finally spoke, his voice tight with suppressed fury. A man with no family, no connections, just a common employee? You've brought shame upon the Sterling name. Claire's face went pale. She started to speak, but I put a hand on hers to stop her. I could feel her hand was cold and trembling slightly. I gave her a reassuring look. Then I looked up and met her father's gaze directly. Sir, I can't choose my family or my background, but I can choose the kind of man I want to be. Claire chose me not for what I have, but for what I can give her. And what can you give her? Mrs. Sterling sneered. The pressure of a mortgage? The pleasure of a crowded subway commute. The words were sharp and cruel. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Ethan spoke up again. He pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase and laid them on the table. I know you might not believe anything I say, But I can't stand by and watch Claire be deceived by this kind of person. This man, Liam Miller, has serious character flaws. He used his position on a previous project to accept bribes from a contractor. Here's the proof I found. He pushed a stack of forged bank statements and photos in front of Mr. Sterling. Not only that, he's a two-timer. While he was stringing Claire along, he was also fooling around with the receptionist at the office. This man doesn't love Claire. He's only after the Sterling family's money. Ethan's performance was masterful, his voice thick with emotion, as if he were the embodiment of justice itself. Claire's parents' expressions grew darker and darker. Mr. Sterling snatched up the evidence and slammed it down on the table. Liam Miller, what do you have to say for yourself? In an instant, all the pressure in the room converged on me. Mr. Sterling's fury, Mrs. Sterling's scorn, Ethan's triumphant smirk. Claire was so frantic her face was flushed. She gripped my hand, shaking her head desperately. Dad, Mom, it's not like that. He's being framed. You be quiet. What has this man done to you? Her father roared. I looked at the panicked Claire, at the smug Ethan, at the enraged Mr. Sterling, and I smiled. I slowly stood up and walked over to Ethan. Mr. Vance, that was a spectacular performance. Unfortunately, your props are a little lacking. From my own briefcase, I pulled out a file. It was thin, just a few pages. I placed it on the table next to Ethan's stack of forgeries. Sir, ma'am, since we're all looking at evidence, perhaps you'd like to see mine as well. This file documents how Mr. Ethan Vance, during his time as the Assistant Director of Procurement at Sterling Industries, colluded with suppliers to inflate prices and embezzle company funds to the tune of $1.8 million. In here, you'll find the bank records for a shell company he opened with his brother-in-law, email correspondence with the suppliers, and a recording of him admitting to taking kickbacks. My voice wasn't loud, but every word was a bomb detonating in the silent living room. In a single instant, all the color drained from Ethan Vance's face. Ethan's smug, sorrowful mask instantly shattered, replaced by sheer panic. He shot up like a scalded cat, lunging for the file. You're lying. That's fake. You're slandering me, he shrieked, his voice cracking with guilt. I twisted my wrist, easily avoiding him. Mr. Sterling was faster. The old man, a veteran of countless boardroom battles, knew the weight of real evidence when he saw it. He snatched the file, his sharp eyes scanning the pages. The more he read, the darker his face became. His grip tightened on the papers, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. Mrs. Sterling leaned in. When she saw the contents, she gasped, her eyes now filled with disgust as she stared at Ethan. Ethan, is this true? She stammered. Ethan's lips trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. No, it's not, Mrs. Sterling. Let me explain. It was Liam. He framed me. He was still trying to squirm his way out. I watched him coldly and pressed play on my phone. Ethan's familiar, oily voice filled the room. Don't worry, Mr. Davis. The contract is yours. Same as always, 3%. Wire it to my brother-in-law's account. You don't have to worry about Claire. What does she know? I've got her wrapped around my little finger. The voice on the recording was smug and calculating. Every word was a slap across Ethan's face, and across the faces of Claire's parents. When the recording ended, the room was deathly silent. Mr. Sterling's chest heaved. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, glaring at Ethan. You animal. He grabbed a teacup from the table and hurled it at him. Ethan dodged, and the cup shattered against the wall behind him, hot tea splashing everywhere. Mr. Sterling, I was wrong. I don't know what came over me. Please, give me another chance. He dropped to his knees with a thud, scrambling over to Mr. Sterling and grabbing his leg, begging. He had finally abandoned all pretense. A chance? Mr. Sterling was trembling with rage, and he kicked Ethan away. My family treated you like a son. Claire gave you her heart, and this is how you repay us? You not only deceived my daughter, you robbed my company blind. Claire stood beside me, her face as white as a sheet as she watched the ugly scene unfold. She was shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, deep rage. She probably never imagined that the man she had once loved, the man she was prepared to marry, was nothing but a vile parasite. I reached out and gently took her cold hand. She flinched but didn't pull away. He's getting desperate, I whispered in her ear. Just as I predicted, the cornered Ethan scrambled to his feet, his face twisted in a vicious snarl as he pointed at Claire. Claire Sterling, don't you act so high and mighty. You think you're so perfect. If it wasn't for your family's money, who would want to put up with an ice princess like you? And I'll tell you something else. I didn't just take money from a company. I used your family's name to take out a massive loan from some very dangerous people. It's all gone, wiped out in crypto. If you don't bail me out, you can wait for the loan sharks to come knocking on your door. Let's see how the great Sterling family looks then. He had finally shown his true colors, revealing the pathetic, loathsome creature he really was. You, Mr. Sterling clutched his chest, nearly collapsing before his wife caught him. As for Claire, after hearing his last words, the final trace of color drained from her face. But her eyes, in that instant, became utterly calm. It was the calm of someone whose heart had just died. She slowly pulled her hand from mine and took 2 steps forward. Ethan Vance, she said, her voice quiet but crystal clear. I am so glad that I finally see you for who you really are. Then she turned to the butler, who was frozen in place. Walter, call the police. Ethan's shouting stopped abruptly. He had never imagined Claire would be so ruthless. The police arrived quickly. As they slapped the handcuffs on Ethan, he was still screaming obscenities. The Sterling mansion, after the earthquake, finally settled into a stunned silence. Mr. Sterling sat on the sofa, looking as if he'd aged 10 years in an hour. Mrs. Sterling sat beside him, silently weeping. After a long time, Mr. Sterling looked up at me, his expression complicated. Liam, today. Thank you. The contempt was gone from his voice. You're welcome, sir. But I was also doing it for myself, I replied honestly. Mrs. Sterling wiped her tears and looked at me with gratitude and a hint of shame. Young man, before. We were wrong. We misjudged you. Please don't hold it against us. I shook my head. I understand. The dramatic showdown in the lion's den had ended in a way none of us had expected. After that night, her parents' attitude toward me did a complete 180. And I finally knew, for certain, that Ethan Vance, our biggest problem, was gone for good. It was late when we left the Sterling estate. On the way home, Claire was silent, staring out the window at the passing city lights. I knew she was hurting. To be deceived, betrayed, and have your deepest wounds torn open in front of your family. No one could just brush that off. When we got back to our little apartment, she went straight to the liquor cabinet and pulled out a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. Have a drink with me, she said. It was the first time she'd ever initiated something like this. I didn't refuse. We didn't turn on the lights. We sat on the floor in the moonlight filtering through the window, drinking in silence. The wine was expensive, a label I didn't recognize. It was smooth, with a long, complex finish. Claire drank quickly, glass after glass, as if it were medicine to soothe her heartache. Soon, a blush crept across her pale cheeks, and her eyes grew hazy. Liam, she said suddenly, am I a failure? Her voice was thick with unshed tears. I thought I was so smart that I was a good judge of character, but I was completely fooled by him. I'm a joke. She tilted her head back and took another large gulp of wine, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. In the moonlight, it shimmered like a shattered pearl. I watched her, this woman who had let down all her guards. She was no longer the powerful CEO, just a normal girl who was hurting, who could cry. And my heart, without any warning, gave a painful squeeze. A strange emotion, tenderness, protectiveness, spread through my chest. You're not a joke, I said, my voice a little hoarse. You're just too good. You expect everyone to be like you, to have principles, to have a conscience. You're not the one who's wrong. The world is just a dirty place. She turned, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. Really? Really? I took a napkin and gently, so gently, wiped the tear from her cheek. My fingertips brushed against her warm skin. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. The air in the room suddenly felt charged. Alcohol, moonlight, and a beautiful, vulnerable woman. It was a dangerous combination. You know, she said, leaning a little closer. Her perfume, mixed with the wine on her breath, was intoxicating. My whole life, my parents told me to be strong, to be independent, to never cry. They raised me to be the heir to Sterling Industries, not a daughter. Everyone envies me. They think I have everything. But I'm not happy at all. Every day, I feel like I'm wearing a mask, pretending to be strong and cold. The truth is, I'm so tired I can barely stand it. As she spoke, fresh tears began to fall. Until I met you. She looked at me, my reflection captured in her hazy eyes. You were like a light. You crashed into my messy life. You helped me get rid of the bad guy. You took care of me. You even cooked for me. Liam, thank you. Then, she wrapped her arms around my neck and hugged me. It was a light, soft hug, hesitant and searching. My entire body went rigid. Her face was buried in the crook of my neck, her warm breath on my skin sending a shiver through me. I could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, feel the softness of her body against mine. My brain screamed at me to push her away. This was a contract. She was drunk. But when I lifted my hands, they landed on her back, patting her gently. For the first time, I admitted to myself that my feelings for this woman had gone far off the rails of our partnership agreement. When it had happened, when I caught her clumsily trying to pick my lock, when she stood helplessly in a kitchen full of broken plates, or when she stood in the doorway, quietly asking me if the oil went in before the onions, I didn't know. I only knew that in this moment, holding her, I never wanted to let go. We stayed like that, holding each other in the quiet. The moonlight bathed us in a soft glow, as if giving our ridiculous beginning a gentle, tender filter. After a long time, she fell asleep in my arms. Her breathing was even like a child's. I carefully lifted her and carried her to the apartment's only bedroom. She was so light, like a feather. I laid her on the bed and pulled the covers over her. Looking at her sleeping face, so peaceful and beautiful without its daytime armor of ice, a wall around my own heart crumbled completely. I leaned down and placed a soft, restrained kiss on her forehead. Good night, Claire Sterling. Ethan Vance was convicted of fraud and embezzlement. With multiple charges, he was sentenced to a long prison term. The apartment he had sold twice was now, legally and unequivocally mine. The darkest cloud that had been hanging over our lives was finally gone. According to our initial agreement, the contract was over. It was time for our divorce. That morning, Claire was up early. She quietly packed her things into a small suitcase. She had arrived with nothing. She was leaving with only a few items of clothing. I stood in the living room, watching her, a lump forming in my throat, unable to say a word. An emptiness I had never known before flooded my heart. She dragged her suitcase to the door and put on her shoes. Liam, she said, her voice low. Yeah, the apartment. It's yours again. Thank you for everything, for taking care of me. I should go now. She didn't look back at me. She opened the door and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. It was the same soft click I'd heard the night she'd tried to pick the lock. Only this time, she took all the warmth in the apartment with her. I stood in the empty living room. The sunlight, streaming through the window, illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. Suddenly, this 300-square-foot box I had bought with my life savings felt like just that again, a cold, empty shell. Everything was back to how it started. No, it was worse. Life returned to a routine, which meant it returned to being dull. I went to work, came home, ate alone, watched TV alone. There was no more clumsy woman in the kitchen who couldn't tell salt from sugar. There was no one curled up on the couch, venting to me about a difficult board member. I thought I would get used to it quickly. I was wrong. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. The way she frowned, the way she smiled, the way she cried when she was drunk, the way she clumsily cut up apples. The scenes played on a loop in my head. Without realizing it, she had seeped into every corner of my life. At the office, we were locked in a strange Cold War. We actively avoided each other. If we passed in the hallway, she would stare straight ahead. In meetings, her gaze would never linger on me for more than a second. We had gone from being the most intimate couple to the most distant of colleagues, colder than we were before. The wall between us, which had started to crumble, was now rebuilt, thicker and more impenetrable than ever. I knew we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. But neither of us had the courage. She had her pride, and I had my insecurity. She was the CEO of Sterling Industries, born with a silver spoon. I was just a guy from a working-class family. The gap between us was a canyon. The contract had been a dream. Now I was awake. Why did I have to ask for more? The feeling was suffocating. I felt like I was back on that desperate night when I'd first discovered I'd been scammed. No, this was worse. Back then, I had only lost money. This time, I think I'd lost my heart. That weekend, I met my best friend from college for a beer. After a couple of IPAs, I told him everything. He listened, then slapped me hard on the back. "Liam, you're a world-class idiot," he said, shaking his head. "You're obviously in love with her, and it's obvious she feels the same way. What is this, some kind of tragic romance movie you two are starring in?" "But we're from different worlds," I said, taking a bitter sip of beer. "Different worlds? What century are you living in?" he scoffed. "Besides, what's so wrong with you? You busted your ass to get where you are. You own property. You're a handsome guy. Most importantly, you were there for her when she was at her lowest. You were her hero. Trust me, women love that stuff. What you need to do is stop feeling sorry for yourself. March over there and tell her how you feel. Tell her you want to be with her. Not because of a contract, not to get revenge on some jerk, but because you, a man, want to spend the rest of your life with her, a woman." His words hit me like a sledgehammer. He was right. What was I waiting for? What was I so afraid of? Rejection? Being looked down on by her family? If I didn't even have the courage to try, how was I any different from Ethan Vance? Meanwhile, across town, in Claire's sleek new condo, her best friend, a fiery fashion editor, had her hands on her hips, giving her a similar lecture. "Claire Sterling, I'm going to ask you one question. Do you miss him?" "Yes," Claire whispered. "Do you want to be with him?" "Yes." "Then why are you sitting here moping instead of going to get him?" her friend demanded. "But we're not a good match." "Not a good match? Because he doesn't have money? He's the head of the Starlight Plaza development. You personally approved his salary and his stock options. He's 100 times better than those trust fund babies you know, who just live off their parents. Because he doesn't have a fancy family? His parents are academics, a good, decent family, not a nest of vipers like Ethan's. Claire, wake up. You're not looking for a business merger. You're looking for a man who can make you laugh, who you can cry with, who makes you feel safe. Forget all those ridiculous rules you've lived by. If you keep this up, some other woman is going to snatch him up, and he'll be gone for good." Her friend's words were the key that unlocked the final cage around Claire's heart. She had always been bound by her status, her family, her duty. She was used to weighing everything in terms of pros and cons. She had forgotten that love is not a balance sheet. That night, both of us, thanks to our friends, had an epiphany. I looked deep inside myself, and I finally admitted it. My feelings for Claire weren't just about protectiveness or habit. It was love, the kind of deep, consuming love that makes you want to merge your soul with another person's and spend the rest of your life with them. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't be a coward anymore. I took out my phone and sent her a text. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Meet me at the place where we first met. I have something I need to tell you." My palms were sweating after I hit send, but my heart was steady. For once, I was going to be brave for myself. The place I chose was my front door, where our story began. I left work early and bought a huge bouquet of champagne-colored roses. Not the cliché red roses Ethan would have bought. Champagne roses mean, "I am devoted only to you." I cleaned the apartment until it sparkled and bought groceries for a feast. I was going to cook for her. I even put on my best suit. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. I took a deep breath, walked over, and opened the door. Claire was standing there. She had dressed up, too. She was wearing a simple lavender dress that made her look soft and elegant. She had on a little makeup, making her even more beautiful. She saw me, then the roses in my hand, and she froze. "You?" I held the roses out to her. "Claire Sterling." My voice was tight with nerves. "I'm in love with you." My confession was simple, direct, maybe even a little clumsy. Her eyes immediately welled up with tears. I kept going. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was when I realized you couldn't tell salt from sugar, but you still tried to cook for me. Maybe it was when you stood up for me at the office, against all the gossip. Or maybe it was when you were drunk, and you hugged me and told me I was like a light in your life. All I know is, after you left, this apartment felt empty. My heart felt empty. I got used to cooking for you, listening to you complain about work. I got used to every moment you were here. I don't want to be your business partner anymore. I want to be your boyfriend, your husband, your family for the rest of our lives. I love you, Claire Sterling. It has nothing to do with a contract or your status. It's just because you're you. So will you? Will you give me a chance to start over for real this time? I finished, my heart pounding as I waited for her answer. She didn't speak. Tears just streamed down her face. She didn't sob. She just cried silently. Just as I started to think I'd been rejected, my heart sinking into my stomach, she suddenly dropped her purse, launched herself at me, and threw her arms around my neck, holding on tight. Yes, she choked out, her voice muffled against my chest. Yes, Liam, yes. You idiot. What took you so long to say it? She was crying and hitting my chest with her fists, but her punches were as soft as a kitten's. I laughed, a real, joyous laugh. I tilted her chin up and kissed her. I kissed her tear-stained cheeks and her trembling lips. This kiss wasn't restrained or hesitant. It was filled with all the longing and love I had suppressed for so long. This time, it wasn't about a contract. It was only about love. And the city lights outside our window bore witness to our new beginning. 5 years later, warm afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our spacious living room. I was sitting on the couch in my sweatpants, answering a few work emails. I was no longer a low-level employee. After the success of the Starlight Plaza project, I'd been promoted again and again. I was now the vice president of the real estate division at Sterling Industries. As for Claire, she had decided to focus more on our family. Daddy, a little girl in a pink princess dress with her hair in pigtails, came barreling down the stairs like a cannonball. Our daughter, Annie. She leaped into my arms, her face a mask of mock indignation. Daddy, Mommy's being mean to you again, she announced. I smiled and stroked her hair. Oh yeah? How is Mommy being mean to Daddy this time? She hid your bonus check again, Annie declared, pointing a chubby finger upstairs. I saw her. She put a big, fat envelope in the Winnie the Pooh boxway in the back of her closet. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just then, Claire came down the stairs, looking elegant even in a cashmere lounge set. She saw the two of us and gave her little traitor a look of fond exasperation. Annie, you're selling out your own mother. Annie made a face at her from the safety of my arms. Mommy was bullying Daddy. I laughed and lifted our daughter up, kissing her cheek. Then I turned to my beautiful wife and tweaked her nose. She's just helping you manage our finances, I said. My money is your money, isn't it? A faint blush appeared on Claire's cheeks. She reached out and straightened the collar of my shirt, a familiar, loving gesture. You and your smooth talk, she murmured. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze was blowing. My wonderful daughter was in my arms. The love of my life was by my side. I looked at them, and my heart felt so full it might burst. My life had taken an unexpected turn on that ridiculous night, a turn that led me to this perfect, beautiful place. Who would have thought? The ordinary guy who had nearly lost everything for an empty apartment now had the most precious home in the entire world.